You're on.
Okie dokie. You say, being that we're still in the counting of the Omar, we try to teach uplifting things or read uplifting things. We had a copy of the Pirkei Avot. We might be teaching out of it or discussing some ideas out of it between now and Pentecost or Shavuot. But we're going to take a look at the first 5 letters of the acrostic Psalm number 37. Last week we talked about the 25th Psalm, and we saw some things on how to apply the 7 traits that we found in the Omar, and we've talked about the 7 traits and how we can apply those to our lives and mix and match to pretty much get us out of or get us into whatever situation we need to be in. But we'll start with verse 1 of the 37th Psalm, and we're actually going to go through the 8th verse today, and then we'll finish it up on Friday. But the first one starts with the letter Aleph, and it says, "Fret not yourself because of evildoers, neither you be envious against them that work unrighteousness." The word for fret not is althi techar, which means to not become angry. And we talked about the 7 traits that we're trying to be in the image of Elohim. The 7 traits are kindness, self-discipline, compassion, restraint, patience, endurance, humility, bonding, and ultimately sovereignty. But anger is an emotion that makes our ability to understand obscure. It clouds our thinking. The word, and on your notes that should actually have a bait in there, but it's bamraim, is used for evildoers. It comes from the word ra'ah, which has a double meaning. It does mean someone who is evil or displeasing or injurious. But on the other side, and it's something that we have to keep in consideration when we deal with these kind of people, that it's someone who is broken or shattered from something somewhere in their life has caused them to be in the position that they're at. And that's most of the time. I mean, we may have some off-the-wall psychotic problem, but most of the time people are mean, rude, ugly, or something because something's going on with them, or something's happened to them in their life, or they've got a situation that's just not right. So we have to understand that people act the way they do for a reason, and that if we are emotionally compromised, we can't understand them. Another word used in this verse is kana, which means to be envious or jealous. And it says, don't be envious against them. Why would we be envious or jealous of somebody who's not doing right? Or be envious or jealous of somebody who's displeasing? So we look at another meaning for the word kana, which means to be provoked or excited into a state of zealous anger against those people who work these acts that just aren't right. And the word is avalah, which means iniquity, injustice, or those who wrongfully distort things. I'm sure that somewhere in our life we have people that act this way, and it's all we can do is to grit our teeth and show them kindness and be patient with them. But this verse begins with the Aleph, which is a representation of Elohim. And if we are in the image of Elohim, then we have to fall back on the traits that we all possess in being in that image, which is, like I said earlier, kindness, self-discipline, compassion, patience or restraint, endurance, humility, being able to bond all these things together, and ultimately sovereignty. And these are called the lower sephirot. These are the 7 lower sephirot. But when we get to a point where we are exercising these on a regular basis and we are actually functioning in these 7, we start to touch on the upper separot, which is binah, which means understanding, chokhmah, which is wisdom, and then ultimately we get a different kind of sovereignty, which is keter, which is the crown, that we become more and more in the image of Elohim. As we grow closer to Elohim, we grow closer to that crown that we receive for our righteousness. So in a nutshell, we can't allow people's actions or inactions, belief or non-belief, to adversely affect us and cloud our own perspective or perception. So we go on to verse 2 of Psalm 37. For they shall soon wither like the grass and fade as the green herb. Now this is following up what we've just read about these particular people, that if they don't pull themselves out, this is what's going to happen. The word for soon is mehera, which means with haste and speedily. In this word, we have to understand that oftentimes we don't have the luxury of the time to get angry at someone because they need help to overcome whatever issues have them broken. So there are times we don't have time to get mad. We need to be, like Paul said, be instant in season and out of season. We have to be able to perceive, discern, and understand. And we can't do any of those things if we're angry because this person is being difficult. The word yimalu comes from the word namal, which doesn't really mean to wither. It means to cut off. But what's interesting is that this word also means to be circumcised. A person who does not allow themselves to be circumcised in the heart, they cannot enter into a true covenant relationship with Elohim, and they will be cut off like the grass, which is chatzir, which, although it means grass or green herb, it also figuratively means something that quickly perishes. So people who are in this state of, I guess, being on the wrong side of shin, so to speak, that aren't seeing life from Elohim's point of view, they're simply seeing it from their carnal point of view, and they are simply enticed by the things that Satan puts into the world. These people are going to, I guess what you could say, they're going to fade away quickly. And it's not necessarily to die, but they're going to fade away in a sense that spiritually they're going to fade away to a point where, like we saw with Pharaoh over the space of time, they get to a point where they're reprobate. There is no turning around. And if we care about them, again, we can't let ourselves get angry about it. We have to stay focused and keep ourselves together. The root of chatzir is chatzar, which means to be walled in. The root letter of this word is the chet, which not only means wall, but sin. So we see that as they fade away, they get walled in, and they get walled in behind the chet. The sin in their life just starts to multiply. And we've seen that from last week's study that sin is really, it means something that we do compulsively. Although we try to stop, we continue to do it, and that we can stop and then we cease to transgress. But these people get walled up behind it, and that's their life. It becomes their life. The word for fade is yibolum, and the root, it comes from the root nabel, which means to be senseless, to be foolish, to languish, and to sing. And ultimately, they fade away. This is what it means, that they become senseless to Elohim, they become senseless to the Word, they become senseless to the Spirit. None of that matters. And they just simply fade away. These are things that we think about in between now and Shavuot. Shavuot, we're going to remember we received the Torah. We also remember that the Ruach fell in the upper room in the 120. And in Shavuot, the week of Shavuot, we're going to be taking a really, really in-depth look at prayer and how to really grab on to Elohim through the Spirit and how to receive back from Him and communicate. So what we're learning now is how to get our emotions in check, and how to avoid negative emotions is something that we're going to try to accomplish in the couple of weeks that we have left before, or 4 weeks or so that we have left before. Number 3 brings us to the bait. And the 3rd verse says, "Trust in Yehovah and do good, dwell in the land and cherish faithfulness." The word for trust is betach, which also means to have confidence in, to be bold in, and to be secure in Yehovah Elohim. This verse is represented by the beit, which means house, and the primitive root of betach is, well, the root letter is beit, but the primitive root is chasa, which means to seek refuge or to make refuge. So we're seeing that something in this deals with us being able to dwell within the house of Elohim in order to build ourselves up so that we can move forward and do the good things that we have to do, and that we will cherish the faithfulness that we have. Chasa also means to confide in and to have hope in Elohim. The word for do is asa, which means to accomplish, to produce, to observe, and celebrate. We ask, what are we accomplishing, producing, observing, and celebrating? Well, good, which is the next word from tov, which also means pleasant, happy, agreeable, and prosperous. Again, in tribute to the beit, we have the word for dwell, which is shekan, which is the root of mishkan, which means tabernacle. So in the phrase "and cherish faithfulness," we understand that the need for our own fidelity as we trust in Yehovah Elohim, we trust Him to be faithful to us as well. He trusts us to be faithful to Him, and we trust Him to be faithful to us. But we have to keep our emotions in check, and we have to be able to grow based on those 7 traits that we learned about. So the word for faithfulness in this particular verse in the Hebrew is emunah. And we're going to see the faithfulness of Elohim in this. The root of this word is "let it so be," which is amen. This word illustrates what we have just discussed, that the acronym for amen is Elohim Melech Ne'eman, which means Elohim, our trustworthy King. And this is something that we cherish in our lives. We strive to be faithful. This is why we strive to study the Word, and nothing that we can do as carnal human beings can ever be 100% accurate. But we strive to get as close to the truth as we can within our limited understanding of the mind of Elohim. I mean, we've said that Yahweh is the most powerful entity in existence of the earth. Who can know His ways? But we can get as close as we can, and He is faithful to lead us. Verse 4 says, "So shalt thou delight thyself in Yehovah, and He shall give thee the petitions of thy heart." It's the best King Jimmy I've got. Anag means delight. Something that this verse tells us to do. We are to delight ourselves in Yehovah. And as we are the bride, this word takes on an effeminate tone in that it means to be pampered, to be delicate, and in doing so, to be happy. We do this in Yehovah. We delight in Yehovah. But we take care of ourselves in Him. And this is what this is saying. We delight in him, and in turn, as we are within his hedge of protection, his gun, his garden, we become Edan, his delight. Our Elohim then gives us the Mishlot, the desires, petitions, and requests of our hearts, Leb, which is our mind, will, emotions, passions, and appetites. He gives us the desires, the requests, the petitions that we put forth from our mind, the things that we want to accomplish. He helps us to accomplish those from our will. Our emotions are satisfied. Our passions and our appetites are also satisfied if we put our trust in him and if we delight ourselves in him. And this is the reward for our faithfulness to Yehovah Elohim. Number 5 is the Gimel. And number 5 says, commit your way unto Yehovah. Trust also in him, and he will bring it to pass. Well, we just get kind of a reaffirmation of what we just talked about. But commit, the word gol, literally means to roll together. And in the word derech, we see that we are rolling together down a path, that we are in Yehovah Elohim, and he is with us rolling down the path. So we kind of imagine ourselves on a Sunday drive in the old roadster, and we're sitting there with the husband, and we're cruising down the road, but we're cruising together. And wherever we go, we're going together. Derech, however, doesn't simply mean way. It means a journey. And we have to keep in mind that our relationship with Yehovah Elohim through his word and anointing is what keeps us rolling along the way in the direction of a meaningful relationship, both now and in the world to come. In the phrase, trust also in him and he will bring it to pass, we reaffirm verses 3 and 4. And this shows us the Gimel, which Gimel, being the third letter of the Aleph Beit, represents stability. The first time we see Gimel as the root of a word in Torah is on the word Gadol, which means great. So it represents the stability and the wealth of Yehovah Elohim in our lives. Verse 6, and he will make your righteousness to go forth as the light and your right as the noonday. You know, and if you were just reading that, you would say, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And he will make your righteousness go forth as the light and your right as the noonday. So let's take a look at it in Hebrew and kind of get an idea of what some of these words actually mean. Our zedek, our righteousness, will yatsa, go forth because of him. So we consider in zedek, it also means justice, and it means prosperity. Its root, zadak, means to be justified, and yatsa, go forth, also means to be delivered. So we will be justified and delivered. But it's interesting that in yatsa, it also means begotten, to bring forth, to send with a commandment, to carry out, to be condemned, to be put away, and to be risen. So we were delivered because the word and salvation of Yehovah was begotten and brought forth as the Son, sent with a commandment in the name of the Father as Yehoshua, to carry out the will of Yehovah the Father, then to be condemned, put away in a grave, and then raised. He was and is the light of humankind, and he is seated at the right hand of Yehovah. Mishpat, meaning not only right, but also justice and true judgment. So he is seated on the judgment seat. And we see that in the ark of the tabernacle, which we saw earlier, that the Shekinah fell on